Hello and welcome to the tutorial video on how to assemble your How to Train Your Dragon map, jumping straight into the materials that you will need. Obviously, to start off, you need the actual art prints. If you don't already have them, please feel free to check out my website in the description below. And speaking of the description, that is where all materials will be listed. For the first step, we will be tearing the edges to make that easier. I did end up using a metal ruler that has these jagged edges. You do not need this item. In fact, this is one of the only items that is just recommended but not required. You can easily tear the paper with your hands. In fact, there will be some sections where you have to tear with your hands, but this is just an optional item to make things easier. I ended up using it because I had to tear a lot of paper and it just made it more efficient and easier for me. But once again, this is not a required item. For staining the edges, I used Tim Holtz Distressed ink in the color Vintage Photo. Now, in order to use the ink pad, you will need blending brushes. I did buy a pack of 6 blending brushes of different sizes. You do not need a pack of 6 of blending brushes in different sizes. You just need one blending brush. It is just a stiff bristle brush, so if you have like an old makeup brush, that also could do. It just needs to be stiff and thickly bristled. You will also need some sort of glue. I personally use this Lineco Neutral pH adhesive. Honestly, you don't need fancy glue. I just prefer paper glue or glue made for bookbinding. That way I know the paper is as secure as it can be. You can use Elmer's glue. I'm sure that will do the trick as well. You will also need a pencil of any kind, some Q-tips for spreading the glue, and then I have a plastic Ziploc bag just to put the Q-tips on in between, like gluing the pieces down, unless you want the Q-tips like sticking to your table. It doesn't really matter. I just am using a Ziploc bag. And then the last and most important supply you will need is patience. Now, since I offer different tiers of this map, if you purchased a tier 2 where the paper is already ripped and stained, you can jump to this time code. Enjoy the process and let's go ahead and get into it. I've ripped a lot of paper. There's 45 pieces, 46 if you include the big centerpiece, and let's just say I ripped around 4,000 pieces. So I feel like I'm a professional at this point, and while doing that, I figured out the most optimum way to rip each piece of paper in like the order in which you need to rip it for you don't accidentally rip through your pieces. If that does happen, you can glue the pieces back together, and honestly, like you shouldn't really be able to tell that much. And then you can say that your map just has character. Now, each piece of paper, other than, of course, the centerpiece, is actually divided by sections on the map. So you'll see top left, top right, bottom left, and bottom right. I recommend that as you rip each piece of paper, you keep them in order, like separately. That way, it's not as much as a big scavenger hunt when you're trying to assemble the map. I will also let you know the order you should place all your pieces after the fact. For assembly is easier because then you just like pull from the top of the pile and assemble in that order. When it comes to ripping the paper, you want to rip the least amount as possible, especially on the centerpiece. So this is the one piece that you really can't use the ruler on because that's just not really enough space to like properly tear. So what I recommend doing is just kind of pinching it slightly, and then you want to tear towards you. That way we get a consistent tear all the way around. So we're just gonna rip basically as least as possible off of this all the way around. If you get sections where it goes bigger, just kind of like redirect it back where you're back to ripping, again, the least amount as possible. It's not a huge deal if you have sections, especially in like the corners, that maybe aren't ripped like slightly because we will be gluing pieces over top of them. However, just for ease of gluing everything together, we want to, again, rip as little as possible off. So you just want to start with the big piece, go ahead and get this piece out of the way. Once you rip all the way around, just set this piece aside. We'll come back to it. And then we're going to go ahead and start with ripping the top left. The trick with all of these pieces, if you're using the ruler, is to align the ruler on the right side of the line. So basically inside the line, that way you can line it up to where it's not just overlapping, it's slightly off. And I do have some bleed, so if you rip off a little bit too much, it's not like the end of the world. So don't stress too much about it, but do try to keep everything nice and close to this black line. So how I do it, especially when there's multiple pieces, is I will press down and have my thumb here to kind of block me from ripping all the way down, because what tends to happen is you go to rip the paper and then the ruler slides and then suddenly you're ripping through your paper instead of straight. So take it in chunks. We're gonna line up the ruler here, put my thumb here to hold it, push down here, grab the end of the paper and just rip towards you like that. And then that way we can move down, realign the ruler, make sure everything's good, kind of keeping the thumb down at the bottom here because again, you don't want it to shift, and then we will just rip the rest of the way. Just like that. Before I move the ruler away, I actually press down and slide it off. That way it just pushes these edges down and there's not like little pieces up, because you will, when you go to stain, you want all those pieces to be flat and it'll make it easier to stain. And then what you want to do is rotate this to the right. We're going to line up this black line here and then just rip across. And remember, push down the ruler to flatten the edges. If you don't have the ruler and you're ripping by hand, you can go back and kind of smooth out the edges like this. And we will come back to all of these. We just want to get the paper completely ripped out and then we'll touch up and work on each individual piece. So same thing here. Since this isn't like a straight shot down, you definitely want to keep your thumb here to block yourself from ripping off too much. So thumb there at the end, rip, perfect. And then you can kind of slide the ruler because it has jagged edges, so it can cut through the paper. So I kind of pushed it through to align with this black line. And then we're taking the ruler, ripping again. Remember to slide the ruler off, rotate to the right again, and then rip there. Perfect. And then same thing, we're going straight down because it's nice and aligned. Thumb blocking here. Okay, slightly move over, thumb blocking on the next piece, and then all the way down to the bottom there. And then same thing we did with the other pieces, just ripping one piece at a time here, just like so. And then here, same thing. They're almost perfectly aligned. Keep your thumb there and then rip straight down there. Rotate and do the same thing. And then this one, we just rotate here and rip. And then we want to rip the title as well. We can set that aside. That way it's just easier for when you have them in stacks, you just put the title on top, keeps it nice and organized, and then you can trash this after you're done with the project. Then what you want to do with all of these pieces is, since you have big chunks here, you want to just align your ruler here and rip as so, trash the pieces here, and you want to do that all the way around on each and every single piece. However, when there's pieces that are nice and small like this, you can tell when I go to align the ruler, there's just no way I can get a grip on a piece that small. Those are the sections where you want to take and just rip it with your fingers, just like you did with the big piece. And it's just nice and simple. Here, kind of pick off that burr there, push it down. There you go. If you get too much white, I don't like a ton of white, you can easily just touch that up, rip off a little bit more, just like that. So go ahead and clean up all the edges. Again, it doesn't matter which order that you do this in. You just want to make sure that the ruler is aligned on the right side of the black line, and you're not lined up perfectly on the line. You are slightly to the right of it. What I like to do to be more efficient with ripping is I'll do all the big pieces first, and then I'll go back and rip all the small sections, and I'll explain why in a second. There are some pieces, I think there's like 2, maybe 3. This piece is a good example of what I'm talking about. Here at the bottom, there's a gap between the island and the black line. Just make sure you add like a little bit more space and rip up. I just didn't perfectly align the black line and I missed it when looking at all the pieces. So just kind of line it up right below that island. Therefore, you're not getting like an extra bit of gappage. Okay, perfect. You have all of your pieces here, and now we're gonna go back with these that had little sections that you couldn't really use the ruler for. This piece also, you wanna do the same thing as obviously all the other ones, but similar to the main big piece, since you can hardly see that black line, that just is my manufacturer. The cutting isn't like consistent with all of the pieces. So you just wanna rip, again, as little as possible off of it. That way you're not losing any of the design. So you want to do that with all of them. And also you want to check each piece to make sure that there's no black lines showing. For example, here, you can see the tiniest bit of a black line there. So you just want to go ahead and kind of clean that up. So you want to do that on all of your pieces, just checking, okay, does everything look good? Push down into the edges. If you have too much white that you want to get rid of, you can kind of just pick that off as well. Just cleaning it up. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's supposed to look very like, you know, torn paper put together, which is exactly what we're doing here. But you want to make sure that the bits of black that might be showing on any pieces are gone. So go ahead and do that, and then I'll come back with the order that you want to place the top left pieces in. Okay, now that I've ripped and cleaned up all the edges, I'm going to go ahead and just show you the order that you want to place all of these in, starting with kind of reverse order. That way you can just like lay them in front. So the first piece you want to set down is this piece here, just the small kind of oval island. And then you want this piece, it has the little lake in the right-hand corner, island on the top. And then you want to lay down the piece with the triple strike dragon. And then you want to lay down the piece with the rain cutter dragon here. And then this small square piece with kind of a little series of islands. And then this one with kind of a longer island at the diagonal here. And then this piece here with the island with a bunch of lakes kind of swooping on the left-hand side. And then you want to lay down the one with the volcano and Wing Maiden Island. Then lay down the piece with the Mud Raker. And then the piece with the Mud Raker's left wing. And then Crescent Island and Sunstone Island. And that is the top left for you here. So you want to keep these in order and keep them in order again when you stain them. Moving on to the top and top right sheets. So we'll separate these after we rip everything up. But in the meantime, let me show you how you want to rip this piece. You want to turn it completely upside down, and we're going to rip down this line first. Same concept as before. You want to make sure that you're blocking with your thumb and then moving the ruler over as you go. So we're lining up, pushing down with our thumb, blocking you from ripping any further, and then pushing down with our fingers here. All right, slightly move the ruler over, blocking once again here. And it's okay, like for example, I missed the corner completely. We can clean that up. Actually, I think I just blocked that with my finger. You can kind of see here that I just missed the corner. But again, we'll be ripping with our fingers to clean everything up, so it's not a big deal. You don't want to rip through the sheet. That's the main priority here. And then you want to rip through the bottom one as well. Push your ruler down, and then same as before, ruler on the inside, rip and push, rip and then push. Perfect. Okay, and then we have the sheet upside down. We're going to turn it to the right. So now we are going to be ripping down this side here. But first we're going to rip here and then down here. So once again, very important in this piece, especially that you block with your thumb. Rip and then rotate the piece of paper so that you can align the ruler here. And then rip once again. And then we want to carefully tear just the slightest bit out to the side here. You don't want to go any further because then when you go to rip, it'll not align. So we want to rip slightly here. And then we are going to align the ruler. Keep your thumb there and rip. Perfect. Push the ruler, rip again, rotate the piece of paper, and rip to separate those two. Perfect. Now we are going to rotate it to where it's facing this direction here, and we are going to rip it in half. So we're going to align our ruler with dark deep piece on the left-hand side here. Same thing. Perfect. Set this aside for a moment to finish off this little piece. We're going to rotate it here. And same concept, rip here. And then go ahead and move the ruler and rip across there. Rotate and rip once again. Perfect. And then lastly, ripping that title. And then we're going to move back to this sheet here. Okay, we're going to align it to where top right is facing us. And we're going to rip the dark deep here, keeping your thumb right there. Perfect. And then we're going to do what we did earlier, rotate the piece of paper and rip. And then for this, it's harder to rip this small piece and then go big than it is if it was like a big piece and then go small. So I just went ahead and aligned it with this piece, not the small piece. And rip all the way across. And then rotate, rip again. And that, of course, you can rip with your fingers or with the ruler when we do our cleanup edges. It's just safer to do it that way. And then this is nice and simple. Ripping here, rotate 180 degrees, and rip off our last title. So just like that, you have all our pieces. You're going to do the same exact thing you did earlier, ripping the big pieces off with the ruler, ripping the little piece with your fingers, and then cleaning up all of the edges. Okay, you should have your top right and your top nice and neat and ripped, and I'm going to go ahead and show you the order in which these need to be in, starting with the top right. We have Valka's Mountain piece, and then we have the Bewilderbeast piece. Then we have the piece with Glacier Island and Storm Cloud. We have Snow Wraith Island, Dragon's Edge, Dark Deep, the island with part of Wraith on it, and then Whispering Death Island, and that is your top right. And then as for your top, the first piece is going to be Wreck Reef. We have Vanaheim and Slitherwing, Dragon Hunter Island with Caldera Cay, Algae Island and Swarmlands, Iron Island and Slipner Island, Melody Island and Drenchwood Forest, and that makes up the top. As a reminder, you are aligning it as I am, so I'm giving you it in reverse order. So when you assemble it, you'll start with Melody Island and then move on to Iron Island and so on and so forth. The next sheet will be the bottom left piece. Now, these are honestly just, I needed to fill space. So if you want to cut around any of these dragons, feel free. But to start, we're going to turn it 180 degrees and line up our rulers. Go ahead, do the same technique that I've been showing you, keeping your thumb from moving the ruler, and then you can just set this piece completely to the side. You don't need it for the map. It's just for you. You can use it as like a coloring page or, again, to cut out the dragons or rip around the dragons and do what you please with them. Okay, once we did that, we're rotating the piece back 180 degrees and ripping down this side here. I'm going to go ahead and rip here and here. That way, it's just kind of a big jump, and I might as well just rip this piece completely. And then you want to line up the ruler again. And if you ripped further here, like I did, when you go to rip the page, it's going to start from there. So what you can do is kind of guide it with your finger to start the rip there. Honestly, not a huge deal. Okay, now I don't know what I'm doing. That's fine. Yeah, just continue to rip all the way down, rotate the piece, rip again. Okay, and then this is also pretty straightforward. We're going to line up here, rotate the piece, line up here, rotate the piece, set your title off to the side, and then same thing here, rip, and voila. Go ahead and tidy up these pieces. All right, pieces are tidied up. Let's go ahead and put them in the correct order, starting with the Scaldron, which is one of my favorite dragons, honestly. And then we have Dragon Vine Island. We have the piece with my signature on it. This nice tiny little rectangle with some islands. The bigger rectangle with more islands, kind of like a half crescent situation here. You have the rest of Dragon Vine Island where it's just Dragon Vine Island. And then we have the islands with the big lakes on them. And then we have Storehouse Island, and that is the bottom left. Now for our last piece is the bottom right and the right. You don't actually need to keep the right title. The only piece that is on the complete right-hand side is Speedstinger Island. Made the title, realized you don't really need it. I'll just incorporate this piece into the bottom right again, doesn't really matter. It's just a piece that juts off away from the main section of the map. So we're going to go ahead and actually start with tearing straight down here. And then do, rotate, tear, rotate, tear. This action can go in your trash pile. You don't need it. And then same thing here, very straightforward, all the way down. Use your thumb to block you from ripping too far. Same thing here. On this piece, since you're going that way, but only by a slight amount and you have a lot of room, you can kind of shove your ruler in there. Rotate. From here, we're going to go ahead and align it, keeping it in the same direction, and rip down to here. Rotate the piece. Go ahead and separate the title and set it aside. Tear off this piece here. And then rotate to where this piece is facing towards you. And there you go. That is your bottom right. The last section you need to put in order, of course, is the bottom right here, starting with the smaller of the two that have like rivers on it. This will be the very last piece that you put on the map. So it has one river on the left-hand side here. And then we have Sunken City. And then the bigger piece with the two rivers going to the southwest. This tiny piece with some hills and mountains. Eretz Fort. Itchy Armpit, fear not, it is on the map. Tyr Island and Thunderclaw Island, the right-hand side of that. Then you have your biggest piece, which has Eel Island and Sunken City. Then you have Nepith Island, which has the jungle. The Snap Trapper, which is again one of my favorite dragons. This small piece that has just a little bit of islands on the right-hand side. And then Speed Stinger Island, and that makes up your bottom right. Now that we have ripped all the pieces and they are laid in the correct order, we're going to move on to staining the edges. Go ahead and grab your distressed ink. Like I said, I'm using the color Vintage Photo as well as my bristle brush. As a note, you do not need to stain the back of each piece unless you're really extra like me. If you're displaying this on a wall, you literally will not see the back, so it doesn't really matter that much. But unfortunately, I am extra. So let me go ahead and show you a good technique of how I stain, starting with the back. Go ahead and just take your bristle brush and you just kind of rub it on the ink pad. You don't need like tons of ink on it because it does spread really nice and easily. So for the back, I keep the brush almost vertically and go ahead and just kind of scrape it all the way down the sides. That way I'm also getting the edges that aren't like visible top and bottom, because it is like slightly three-dimensional. Obviously, it's not like the thickest thing, but I don't know if you can tell. That's stained, and then you can tell the white is clearly not. So go ahead and just rotate all the way around, keeping it almost at a vertical angle because you don't really need to stain onto the back. So go ahead and just stain, keeping that brush vertically, just like that. And once you see that, okay, there's not a lot of white, again, the back doesn't really matter that much. This is just if you want to be extra. And then go ahead and you want to reapply some of the ink. And for this, you want to brush outwards at a 45-ish degree angle. Again, it does not have to be perfect. So you just want to hold the piece, have your fingers just underneath it. That way the paper's not like bending like so, because then you're not getting any resistance. So keep your fingers right underneath it and just go ahead and brush at that 45-degree angle. You can keep going until you feel like there's still some white showing. So maybe I should reapply some of the ink and keep staining at that 45-degree angle. If you feel like you're getting harsh lines, go ahead and just kind of blend it out. This is a blending brush after all. So nice and simple, keep it at that 45-degree angle, keep your fingers underneath it. Your fingers will get covered in stain. It should come off, maybe not on the first wash, but it does come off, I promise. And go ahead and voila, just like so. Now you want to do that for all 45 pieces. Remember to keep things in order. If you're grabbing from the top, honestly, a good way to do it is flip it over. So we'll go ahead and take this top left. We'll flip that over here, and then we'll flip it over. That way it's keeping everything in the correct order, and we can flip it back over after we finish staining everything. So go ahead and stain all 45 pieces, and then come back and we will start the assembly part, which is, I know, what you've all been dying to do. It is the moment you all have been waiting for, and I have something that I need to say, and you may not like what I have to say next. Your map will not be perfect. Leave your perfectionism behind and think of this as a puzzle where I get to tell you where everything goes. But no matter how hard you try, it will not be perfectly aligned, and that's for two main reasons. One, since we ripped the paper, there is that small gap of where the paper obviously loses its front pattern. So in order to line everything up, you do have to slightly eyeball in some sections. And two, if you misalign something by even the slightest amount, that may cause something else to be slightly misaligned, and so on and so forth. Again, the margins are so absolute that it's pretty much impossible. So just leave the perfectionism behind and enjoy the process of putting the map together. I promise you, it will look fine when you're not up close and personal 2 inches from the paper trying to line everything up and assemble it. When it's fully together, I promise you, unless you put a piece in the wrong spot, it will look fine. And I'm saying this as a perfectionist, so just as a PSA. Now, hopefully if you purchased a pre-stained piece of paper, you didn't ignore these stickers that says keep in order, because that will make your life much easier. If you were the one to rip and stain the paper, I told you the exact order everything needs to be in, but if you decided to not put the pieces into order, that's on you. Just match the pieces that I'm putting in where. Nice and simple. All right, let's let the fun begin. Go ahead and grab your glue, pencil, Q-tips. If you want to put your Q-tips on something like a Ziploc bag, go ahead and carefully open these bags and take your pieces out without ruining the order that they're in. We will be working from top left, top right, bottom left, and bottom right. So you can go ahead and set all these bottom pieces to the side, and then we're gonna go ahead and get started with all of these pieces. Go ahead, you can finally throw away your top left title, and we will be starting with Sunstone and Crescent Island. Now, this is here in the top left. So what you're trying to line up with is we have Thor Rock Island here. Actually, go ahead and zoom that in for you can see. We have part of Thor Rock Island here, and then we have part of Sunstone Island here. So what you want to focus on is trying to line up the words the best you can. Go ahead and kind of see where they align. And I know that this piece covers all the way across on this sheet of paper. So when I apply the glue, I need to apply all the way across here. And then on this sheet, I know that I'm covering Thor Rock, so I'm going to cover from the H all the way up to the side. If you want, you can take your pencil and just kind of mark, okay, I'm going to go from the H to the top. And then if you want, you can draw a very light and small line on the back so you remember which side. But again, I assembled a lot of these maps, so I have faith that hopefully I'll put the glue on the correct sides. So I'm going to go ahead and actually start with putting glue on this piece here. So we're just going to do a very light line. You don't want too much since we're applying glue on both sides and it will like smoosh out from underneath the pieces. So you don't want tons of glue, but I do like doing it on both since we have these ripped edges. And this is where your Q-tip comes in, and you want to kind of just take the Q-tip and smush the glue to the outside where it covers each individual paper rip section. Does that make sense? So you want to apply the glue all the way to the edge. That's what's important, is you want these edges to be as fused as possible. And you want to do the same thing on the actual map, just pushing the glue all the way to the edges, making sure that they get a nice coat. And if it does, you know, smush out from underneath, that's okay. We can just clean that up. But go ahead, and then we can take our piece here. And we want to, again, line it up. I kind of decided to line it up here. Looks good to me. All right, go ahead and push down. Careful, the glue, since you have it on both papers, will slide around. So you want to just push it, but not too much to where it moved like I 100% did. That's totally fine. We'll try this again. Again, I assembled so many and yet here I am. All right, so then what I like to do is I like to push gently, because obviously you don't want to slide it, and push where the glue does want to come out. That way you know you're getting the edges completely coated here. And you can either take your finger and clean up and kind of dab the glue, or you can take a cleaned Q-tip and just kind of like scoop up the edges. You will go through a lot of Q-tips if you do it this way. I usually just kind of take my finger, poke at it, and then kind of wipe the glue off so I'm not spreading glue everywhere. So boom, nice and simple. That is first piece done. And then we move on to our next piece here. I'm not gonna like talk about every single piece that I grab because they should be in order. So just, double check visually to make sure you have the correct one. Now this piece will line up actually at the top right here. It's kind of hard to tell. This is a very small margin you'll be lining up with. So basically there's a little loop. I'm gonna use my pencil to point to it. This little loop where the island has some water in between. That is where that loop is on this piece. So you want to align it right at the top there. And this is actually, I might have ripped too much on my piece here. So there's not a lot of other like good signs of like where to line everything up, but just know that it is right on the edge. Yours may actually overlap here, so you can glue here. That is clearly not the case with mine, but there will be another piece that goes like right here, so that will help like anchor it to the piece. So because of the fact that I have so little, I'm gonna kind of, okay, I know where this kind of dips in. We're gonna grab there, and I'm gonna just mark with my pencil that from here all the way across, that's where I need the glue. And then on this piece, I know, okay, the glue is going all the way to the right side of this hill, basically, right above the hill. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and apply the glue to right above that hill. And then on the back, just this little section. Once again, all the maps will be different, which honestly I think is kind of cool that every single map will be unique, but you just wanna do your best to line everything up to the best of your ability and to the best of how your tears ended up looking. So you wanna go ahead and align that right at the top there. You can kind of see that I didn't even need that much glue, but I'm gonna go ahead and kind of clean it up and smush it onto there, just as so. Kind of give it a second to dry. That is like the tiniest margins, but there will also be a piece on the right-hand side as well as the left-hand side. So it will anchor the piece to other pieces. So don't stress too much if you have like the slightest amount of gluing space like I did. This is the next piece we're going to align. When it comes to lining up islands versus dragons, I do like to prioritize lining up with the dragon. So let's say, oh, the island, it doesn't, but let's say the island would line up here, but then you can tell, oh my gosh, like the wing, it looks like there's too much wing and it just doesn't look good. And so I like to prioritize lining up the dragon. You can also use the water as a good reference for lining up. So I know, okay, there's water here, that's part of that water, so that also should slightly be showing. And then we can kind of look here and line that up to, once again, the best of our abilities here. And from looking at this piece, I know that along this side, that covers all the way down, this covers all the way across, and then this covers up to here. So I'm gonna put my finger here, flip over the sheet of paper, and mark with my pencil that it goes down across here, all the way across the bottom, and then all the way up the side. You can draw actual pencil lines. I just need the little marks as reference. And then we know, okay, this lines up to slightly to the right of the river. So I'm just gonna put a little mark so I know I can put glue all the way to that mark. And then from here, we obviously know it goes, let's say it aligns with this water part. So I'm gonna go ahead and just put a little line there as well. So I know to put glue from here all the way across to the right-hand side of the river. And then on the back of this, we're doing it all the way around. So that's how I mark each piece as well. Again, you can use actual pencil lines, especially if you don't care what the back looks like. You can put pencil lines to your heart's content because the back will, won't be seen. So let's go ahead and put some glue here. So we're going across all the way to the top, across to my pencil lines here, and then on the back, it just goes all the way around. Again, you really don't need like a ton of glue. It's not like you're gonna be throwing this map around. Hello. It's not like you're gonna be throwing this map around. You're just probably displaying it on your wall. So you need enough glue where it's nice and secure, but nothing too crazy to where you're getting like globs of glue that you're needing to clean up. So go ahead and just spread out all the glue here. Same thing here. We just want our edges like really secure. And then because this goes like all the way down, I'm just gonna put a like glob of glue right there as well, just to secure it a little extra. All right, and we're gonna take our piece and line it up here. Again, there's a lot of places where this needs to be aligned, from the dragon wing to this section of the island to this section of the island. Again, lots of little things to line up. Do it, once again, to the best of your abilities. I promise you it will look epic regardless of how perfectly aligned it is. So there we go. Next piece, nice and easy one, lining up with these islands here and this big lake, as well as I have a section of this river, so I'm going to line it up to the river and then there. This slightly is misaligned, so maybe I'll just try to cover that wing slightly and rotate it. So we'll say there. All right. So we know all the way across here, all the way on the bottom here, and then up to this section here. So flipping it over, making a little mark all the way across the bottom, and then all the way up to the top. And then I know, okay, all the way across here, and then all the way to about right here needs some glue as well. So the more you use the Q-tip, the more it will kind of like fuzz out like this. So I like to just kind of take it. I know I'm covering this guy, so I'm just going to take it and kind of spin it. That way it re-grabs all the little fuzzy bits. You will be doing that continuously. I went through so many Q-tips because it got to the point where it was just driving me crazy. But here we go, spreading out the glue here. Right, gonna do just a little glob here as well, since this is a bigger piece. Can also spin that one more time and align this here. All right, so we're aligning with the islands here, the river, and then covering that wing slightly as well. Go ahead, push down and out here. Make sure the edges and the corners especially are smushed down. We have a bit of glue here. Go ahead and just clean that up. Bit of glue here. Okay, perfect. Next piece, we're aligning this little like claw looking thing with trees up to this point here. So you can kind of see where the trees overlap in the same like pattern. You can also tell this little like curve of this island. There's a curve on this piece as well, and that is what we're lining up here. So once again, very small margins, but that's kind of what we're working with because I wanted to make this as big as possible, and this is the way that it had to be done. So we're marking at this point here, all the way up to the top, and then for this piece on the back, all the way down. You can probably use like a little bit more glue than this. I just have to be a little sparing with my glue since I'm running out. And I thought my order would come in earlier and it did not. So you can use like a little bit more glue than what I'm using. But again, you don't need like a ton of it. And then once again, we're lining up with that little like curve section as well as the trees. Go ahead and smush that. I have actually a lot of glue here. So I'm going to take a Q-tip and just kind of clean that up a little bit. Next piece, this actually has more of an overlap. We are going from this like river section, so it's right below the river, around here-ish. Once again, you can also line up the water. That is a really helpful tool to line these pieces up. Since my head is not directly above the camera, it is a little hard for me to see. Usually I'm like face here, but obviously I need you guys to see where I'm lining things up. All right, so we're gonna mark here. That goes to just about there. This goes to just about here. And then on this sheet, we're gonna go from here across and then from about here across as well. Go ahead and put your glue. So there's the river as a reference, the mountains as a reference, as well as the water as a good reference. Right, this next piece will overlap here as well as here. So this is another good anchor piece for these two pieces that are literally hanging on by a hair. So we're lining up here. Clearly you can tell I did not do a very good job at aligning this piece. So when I overlap it here, this is completely off. You don't want to prioritize lining up with this piece. You want to prioritize lining up with the bottom because there's another piece that's going to overlap here and it doesn't affect where this particular island is at. So focus less on lining up at the top here and more on lining up at the bottom here. So you can see there's just a little section where I'm lining up the mountains Okay, looking at this, we're going from about here, all the way across here. And then on the bottom, we're lining up to just about here. And then looking at this, we know we're going all the way around to about here. So I can put the glue all the way around here, on all the edges, all the way across. And then here, we're going across just like that. But this is a perfect example of it looks like I lined up everything perfectly. Like there's no major mistakes that you can see. And yet something is still off. But again, it really doesn't matter that much. So go ahead and line up with the bottom and line up with the side as well slightly. Go ahead and push this down, really focus on the edges for they don't peel up. I'm gonna clean up this little bit of glue here. All right, moving on to the next piece. This is exactly the piece I was actually talking about, where you're going to align it right about here-ish. Where are we? Yeah, right about here. And you can kind of see that this island doesn't really matter because there's no overlap, and then there's no real overlap here as well. So just lining up here, perfect. So we know all the way across, all the way to the side, and then slightly on the bottom here. Okay, and then we know from here, we're gonna go all the way to this island. We're gonna go all the way up and then across to about here. Okay, glue goes all the way down to this island, and then checking my marks here, all the way across the top and the side. I also put like a little extra glue on like the seams where there's more layered, just because I feel like we need things to really be smushed down and secure at all like the joints. I guess joints with some air quotes. All right, so we're lining up at the bottom here, and then we're lining up with this piece and these islands here. All right, moving back up to the top here, you can kind of see this island is this island, and we are lining up with this lake as well. Lots of little pieces to line up here. Looking at the marks, all right, we're going from this lake. We know we're going all the way down the side here. From here, we're going all the way across and all the way down, so no big deal on that end. You can put like an extra little bit at the bottom there, since it covers a wider area. Okay, next piece, nice and simple. We're just lining up this lake with this lake at the top. Okay, we know that this goes to about here. This goes all the way up. And then this goes all the way across the bottom. Perfect. And then this goes about halfway up the side. Just like that. I wish I could have, put marks on here to make this easier for you guys, but I feel like because everything's going to be slightly off for everybody, there was just no realistic way to do that, since everyone's individually ripping their own pieces of paper, or I ripped your paper for you, but I'm still human, so every single piece is slightly ripped differently, so I wasn't able to actually put marks on here. All right, the last piece of the top left, nice and simple. We are just lining up part of the triple strike here, which is honestly probably the easiest piece that you're going to put on here. All right, just lining up with the tail and the wing. And just like that, you've completed the entire top left section. And now we're moving on to the top middle section. Our top, go ahead and throw away this piece. All right, Drenchwood Forest. We are lining up with Drenchwood Forest here. You can see the words that line up here. There's also this little speck of water that you may have on yours. You can also line up with there, since it's kind of harder to see the lettering, but you just want to kind of eyeball it there. Okay, we know that across the bottom we're putting glue. We can put a mark, and then we know, okay, we're going to the D, and then we're going to this little watermark. So put 2 marks there. Okay, lining up that little water droplet, and then kind of looking at where the D is on Drenchwood. All right, this piece of this island, we are lining up to this piece, as well as lining up with here. Honestly, prioritize this piece less and prioritize these more, because this will be completely covered up regardless. And also prioritize our little dragon up here. So we know all the way across, all the way down on this piece. Okay, lining up the island, lining up the tail, and lining up the island on the big piece. The next piece is a little different. Instead of layering on top, we are layering underneath. And so in order to do that, we know, okay, we're putting glue all the way across the bottom. So we're gonna actually mark on the front side of this. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and actually zoom out so you can see a little bit more of the map. And then we know, okay, we're gluing pretty much all the way across on the top as well. So we're going to flip over our entire map and we're putting glue all the way across the back here. And then obviously to align everything, we need to flip the map back over, but we don't want this touching the table. So flip it, but kind of hold it up. Therefore, you're not getting glue everywhere, and then put your piece underneath. And then you want to align this. And there's only one other piece that we have to do that with. That's like one of my least favorite bits, when you have to like flip it back over and align it like upside down. Okay, next piece, nice and easy. We're aligning Algae Island. And this is a case that you won't see very often because I tried to keep the rips not overlapping. But because we ripped Island, we're kind of missing some of the letters because we just covered them up. So if you wanted to put this piece underneath, feel free. I like the order that I have it in, and this honestly doesn't bother me that much. You can also take a pen and fill in if you'd like, but honestly, I like it. I think it adds character. It makes it look more aged and more, you know, like it's been places. This is the other piece that goes underneath everything. This is difficult just because we're lining up two separate sections and we want to get it as, you know, perfect as possible, but also it doesn't matter like that much because if we align this underneath here, this big island you can't see, this island you can't see. I have like the slightest section on the top of this island, but you can't really see it. So you can kind of throw this wherever it pleases you. Doesn't have to be perfect, but the joining of the sections is a little bit tricky. Again, looks like this doesn't really matter that much. We are going to go ahead and mark this piece though. So I need glue there, and then I need glue from here to around about all the way down. All right, perfect. And then the back side, this is this part that I hate. But you can also kind of just mark from here and just kind of lift and mark just like that. Actually, what I'm going to do, lift and mark there. Okay, lining up there. Okay, we know from just about here, we need to mark, and then all the way down, we have this nice little gap, so we don't want to fill glue all the way down to the bottom. So we'll say to about right here, we'll need glue. Okay, flipping this over, kind of see where our marks are. All right, we're going up this way and we're going down this way, and then this is over and over. All right, perfect. Go ahead and put the glue down. This one goes here in this corner. All right, same thing as before. It will be a little trickier to not have this glue touch. So go ahead and put your piece down and keep these sections lifted. All right, and then we want to align it in the air as best as we can so we don't smear glue everywhere. Kind of lift, make sure there's no glue on the bottom. Just like so. And then the last piece for the top is going to be Wreck Reef. We have the slightest bit of wing here, and that is right here on the squirrel, as well as island. So we can line up the N and the wing. You can kind of see I have like the slightest bit of gappage. Maybe you can't actually see that. I have the slightest bit of gappage. Once again, I like that because it feels so just like collage put together. It just seems like I ripped slightly in, so there's just a slight misalignment. Or not necessarily a misalignment, just like pieces of the map missing. Once again, totally okay, totally not a big deal. There'll be pieces to anchor this piece on more anyways. So I'm gonna go ahead and just put some glue here on the lettering. I'm not gonna make a line because it doesn't look like I overlap all the way down. And then we'll put some glue on the wing as well. And then we're gonna do the same thing on this side. I want just a little bit of glue right here, and then a little bit of glue where the wing is. And then we want glue all the way across the bottom. Okay, a little dot of glue there, a little dot of glue there. And what I like to do where there's like little pieces and there's glue coming out, I kind of take the glue and also dab it on top. That way it's getting like an extra layer of glue almost getting smushed down on top I don't know if that makes sense. And that is the entire top section done. Making really good progress. And we move on to the top right. Go ahead and throw this title away. We're lining up this W and this section of island, we can tell. All right, W onwards, we're going up, and then this side needs some glue as well. This next piece will go on the right side of the piece we just put on, lining up this little piece of the island with this one here. Again, nice and simple, and then also lining up the lettering here. All right, for dark deep, that is this big section here. And we have all these little pieces on the bottom that we want to try to line up with. Okay, as well as lining up with the piece on this side here. Okay, next piece, we're lining up here. We're lining up his feet, this feet here. So just that section. There's a little bit that overlaps here, so we'll just go top and across. Next piece, nice and obvious, we're lining up with his wing as well as the island. Once again, there might be a gap slightly above, just depends on how much that you tore. But once again, prioritize the dragon itself. Because the islands, if they're slightly misaligned, it's harder to tell. With the dragons, I feel like maybe it's a little bit more obvious. Okay, next piece, at the top here, we have the slightest bit of glacial island. So we're just gonna line up with island here. So this goes pretty much all the way across except for the end piece, and then this will go from the apostrophe. All right, this guy is lining up with this little corner. If you have this corner, we're lining up with this island as well as the wing, which there isn't much wing to line up with. And then the very last piece of the top right is just, honestly, I would focus the most on lining up these two dragons. Like I've said over and over again, we want to focus on the dragons more so than the islands because it's just less noticeable. And that is the top right complete for you. So that is the complete top of the map fully assembled. And now we can do bottom left and bottom right. So if you set your pieces aside, go ahead and grab them, throw away that bottom left piece, and we will go ahead and get started again with Storehouse Island. We want to line up this gap with this gap here. Okay, that's where the pieces connect. So this little arch here connects with this little arch here, and then this little divot here connects with that little divot. Scaldron Island, this SCA, lines up here. So nice and simple, we're just lining up over top of that and then lining up these pieces as well. Now, Dragonvine Island is really unique because you will only be using the watermarks to line up. So the top right watermarks line up with this water right below this tiny little island here. So you want to line it up just like so. So that's just complete bit of corner glue. I don't think I need to measure anything out for that. Okay, next piece is down at the bottom here. This is again another one that has very small margins. We have this little scoop on this island at the top here with this scoop right below that lake. This island lines up with this island, so it will be going all the way across. Tiny island and the lake as well. Okay, this little piece at the very, very bottom, same thing. We have, see these two islands, they line up with these two islands here, and that will just overlap. Signature piece, this kind of Y shape. We're lining up with this Y shape. You can kind of look at the mountain and that tree. So we have a tree and a mountain here that will be overlapping to round about there. And then this one, kind of obvious, Dragonvine Island, lining up with this and then lining up. If you have a little section, I have like a little sections of that island there, little section of the island here. You don't want to leave like puddles of glue just because when it dries, bumps with the glue. So I like cleaning it up. All right, and then we're moving actually back up to the top here to Scaldron Island. Nice and simple. We are just lining up Scaldron Island, and then we have little divots down here as well that we can line up. And that is your complete bottom left done. And we move on to the right. All right, I know I said bottom right, but we are gonna go ahead and put right. It's separate from everything, so I just always called it right, but nice and simple. We're going all the way down on the glue on the paper, and then we're going from this island to, let's say, just below that watermark. Got some trees, some grass, some water, nice and simple. Again, this is nice and easy because it doesn't need to line up with anything else except for this big main piece. So, all right, and then we are moving to the bottom. This is a very small margin once again. We have this little loop here in this little squiggle. Sorry if I couldn't be more descriptive. And then we have this and this big piece. So this big piece here is that tiny little piece here, and that is this part of this. This is another one of those pieces that will have another anchor piece. So it doesn't matter that it's like hanging on by a thread, it will be anchored by something else. And also pretty much covered up. So if you misalign this, not necessarily the end of the world. And then we will put this piece on, which aligns with this wing. So you got to kind of match the letters there as well as this island. And then the next piece is the one that overlaps all of that, lining up with the jungle here. And as you can see, that island on that piece is completely gone, so it didn't matter too much. Clean up some of this glue here. Our next piece, we're lining up eel, which is, there's 2 E's here on mine, lining up with eel here. So nice and simple. There's also these islands you can line up with as well. All right, and then we have Thunderclaw lining up with Thunderclaw. Nice and simple once again. Finally, the itchy armpit, of course. Again, priority is the dragon itself. Okay, Eretz Fort is down here at the bottom. We can focus on this cluster of trees. In this cluster of trees, they should overlap, as well as this island overlapping to here. So it's all the way in the corner. And then this nice and little piece. These mountains are the top of this mountain range off to the left. Then we have our big river piece. This is lining up right below Itchy Armpit. So all these little islands you can line up with. All right, 2 more pieces. We have Sunken City. Easy. Going right on top of Sunken City. We're lining up with this piece here and then these 3 little islands. And then we have the last and final piece. Nice and simple. Going right here below Sunken City, lining up your river here, as well as the island across there. So this goes all the way down to here. This goes across to the mountains. This goes all the way across and then around to just about here. There we go. That is your bottom right. And that should wrap up assembling your How to Train Your Dragon map. A couple notes before you put it on your wall. Honestly, I would let the glue set for about 12 hours. Honestly, you can do whatever you want. I let mine set for at least 24 hours before doing anything crazy with it. And then as for hanging it up, I recommend just using push pins. Not necessarily a push pin through the map itself, but rather a push pin here to support it, in this little hole here to support it, as well as here to support it. And then it can just hang free weight on its own versus like stabbing it with a push pin. You can just kind of use it to mount it on the push pins versus stabbing a hole. I really hope that you enjoy the process of putting together this project. I had so much fun designing this project, and getting to have it in all of y'all's hands is so exciting. Please feel free to leave me your favorite dragon from the How to Train Your Dragon universe in the comments below, just letting you know that you completed the map and, you know, a little piece of trivia about y'all. Also, if you do complete this and have it displayed, please feel free to tag me in any photos you may post on social media at Oakleaf Arrow Studios. I would love to see it and where you end up putting it. But regardless, thank you so much for your support. If you have any questions, also feel free to leave them below. And if you want some more behind the scenes content or studio vlogs from me, feel free to subscribe and stick around and see what else comes on this channel. But in the meantime, enjoy exploring the world of How to Train Your Dragon.